Ko Ranginui ki runga, ko Papatonu ki raro, ko ngā tangata kei Wanganui a TA Māori ora. A tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi mahana a ki a koutou. A tēnā koutou ngā kaimahi, ngā mihi nui ki a koutou. Kei tini ki a koe Leone, CEO. Going to go to Kim for the karakia. Thank you.
Kia tau mai te maramatanga, kia tau mai te rangamārie, kia tau mai ki te kaha me te aroha mō tēnei kaupapa, hui e taiki e. Let's be grounded in clarity, let's be peaceful, let's be strong and compassionate with these issues. Bind together, and so it is.
Kia ora, thank you. We've acknowledged the spiritual realms or heavenly realms, the earth that sustains us and us people between them. And I've given greetings to us all here today, with particular greetings to our staff and our CEO. Thank you. Welcome to those on Zoom. So Councillor Mailing's on Zoom. It's also attending to our LGNZ AGM voting. That's correct, I think. And I see we have Cherie and Max from media on Zoom with us. And a reminder to those on Zoom, microphones are muted, please. And we'll keep an eye out for your hands up. Apologies, we've got an apology from Mayor King for lateness. Any other apologies? Somebody happy to move? Thank you, Councillor Dowler, and seconded Councillor Tufnell. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried, thank you. We have no speakers in public forum. Any declarations of interest? No, thank you. Minutes. We need to confirm the minutes of the Regulatory Committee meeting held on Thursday, the 16th of June, that they be confirmed as a true and correct record of the meeting.
I'll move.
You'll move. Thank you. Councillor Ogilvie and a seconder. Councillor Turley, thank you. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried, thank you. To the action list. What do we do with that?
Well, it's available to councillors, so all of the actions have been completed. Happy to open up on any discussions or follow up that's required.
Any comments on the action list? Good to see those items have been completed. And I thought particularly in terms of the guidance from MFA on the sea level rise, I thought it was good to see that comment there around about that arriving. Just simply that's something to expect, I think. So so we don't do anything formal with the action list, do we? Just a note. Okay, thank you. Thank you. So we'll move to my chair's report. And there's an error in there relating to Katrina. Where we said that Katrina was at the West Coast Regional Council. That was incorrect. And was in fact, Katrina was actually in fact based in Greymouth at Grey District Council, and also in, with some private consultancies down there. And it's one of us born and bred Golden Bay people, so that will certainly put you in good stead. So welcome to your new role there, Katrina. Just wanted to make that correction. And to add to my chair's report, just to say that I attended, along with Councillor Mailing and Councillor McKenzie and our CEO, LGNZ conference in Palmerston North. My colleagues were a little late in arriving, had a few travel disruption matters, but it was really helpful to go to the conference. And sometimes people say, oh, is there any point in that? But actually it was very informative. I found it uplifting and inspiring to hear some pretty good speakers, actually. The theme of the conference was Te Wāhiki Mai, which is the future. So it was very focused around the future. And the keynote speaker was a friend of Leonie's, actually, Melissa Clark-Reynolds, who I just found very inspiring. So she trained in a range of ways, but is now described as a futurist or a future practitioner or a foresight practitioner. And we learned from her great presentation that there are no future facts. So the idea of what we can expect in the future. And she did this great presentation of looking at 20 or 30 years ago, some great pictures of things that we had then and what we were doing. And at that point, we would never have imagined actually how we live now, just such a short time ago. It was very impactful and had some great quotes from people that invented the, Edison, was it, with a telephone? And his quote was, it was asked whether people would ever have these things. And he said, well, of course not. Why would, it's ridiculous to think people would each have one in their home. What would be the point of that? And also the early computer designers and inventors said the same thing. Well, no, of course people wouldn't have them in their home, but actually we have them in our back pocket now. So it was very interesting. And alongside the idea there are no future facts. So that's the thing that, we can't actually imagine where we're going to be. So here we are making decisions for the future into a space that actually we can probably barely imagine, actually. And she said the future's all around us. It's just not that evenly distributed. And also said that we're called to be architects of their future, not its victims. And and one of the other impactful things that she presented was this sort of diagram of people who've lived and died, those of us alive today, and then those who to come. And, those who have been was a sort of circle like this. Us was this little circle, and those to come was this great big circle. So it really woke us up, I think, to what our business is in terms of making decisions for the future. And, of course, we heard from a number of ministers, Parker, Nash, the Prime Minister, and Minister Mahuta. And it does make a difference, I think, to hear them speak as opposed to just reading their speeches. So, I found it very helpful, actually, to go. And I also attended the Maru Atahui, which is the day before the conference proper, and that's all part of the conference. And that's the hui for Māori elected members that other people can attend to. And that was really, really helpful as well, yeah. And a bit more fun, to be fair, quite a bit of laughing and, quite relaxed, and be able to just ask questions of ministers. And the reform panels that so the Review for Local Government panel presented at both of those events. Welcome, Mayor King. So I'm happy to speak with anyone that would like to hear more about the conference. Councillor Mayling, you have your hand up.
Well, I'm happy to move your report, Madam Chair, and I will make a comment that I did attend the AGM this morning, and I can let you know that all 6 remits were passed, and there was one slight amendment to one in relation to the issue about, I'm trying to think, having a senior moment here. I'll get back to you about that. But anyway, all 6 remits were passed, and there was good attendance. There was 150 odd people at it, but it is not easy on Zoom. So I'm happy to move your report, and I'll lower my hand. I expect to be here till about 12, but I may have to nip out because I'm not well.
Thank you, Councillor Mayling.
Through the chair, I can remind Councillor Mayling that the amendment was to public transport, where we asked for free charges, whereas they wanted to go broader than that and extend the public transport network and make it more accessible. So that was what the amendment was, and it was passed. Yep.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Bryant will second that speech.
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I wasn't here at your first meeting, so I'd just like to congratulate you on your new role. Well done.
Thank you.
Good luck going forward. And yes, no, it is certainly good to attend conferences, stuff like that. And you're talking about the phones. I can remember a similar situation, but now quite a number of people have 2 phones, of course. So it's all changing times, isn't it? So yeah, no, well done. And I think that's about all I have to say for now. And I'm happy to second the report.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? I'll put my report. I'll move. It's been moved by Councillor Mayling and seconded by Councillor Bryant. All those in favour say aye. Against? Aye. Thank you. Carried. And we move now to the Environmental Assurance Group Manager's report. And just to note that after that, we're going to go to stock controls. There was a different order than was in our diligent document. So over to you, Kim. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll take my report as read, but just a few sort of extracts from it. The message that I think it conveys is that the regulatory landscape is changing. There are a number of pressure points that our society and our local community are now facing. Regulation itself is becoming a craft, and I've talked a little bit about where we go to get some of the guidance around how to treat it as a craft, and that we're better equipped to deal with the challenges that are being thrown at us. I'm also noting an increased national focus, and today there are a number of submissions that we've put into some of those national processes, which we're seeking retrospective approval for. But there's also a lot of activity locally in the region, which is requiring us to really stretch our minds as to how we go about being an efficient and effective regulator in the things that we do on behalf of our community. But I guess that's the flavour of what I've endeavoured to put together as the report for this particular committee.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you, Kim, for your report. Just in previous meetings, we have talked about how important it is that people on rural properties understand the changing frameworks with respect to freshwater and what's actually required of them. And when we've talked about it previously, you know, we've discussed the council's role in ensuring that people are well informed, particularly those people that might not affiliate with some of the national bodies where they, you know, which, you know, they are a good channel for information, but not all rural landowners are affiliated to them. So my question really is, you know, do we have a plan in terms of promulgating information and communicating so that those rural landowners understand the changing landscape that they're required to comply with?
Through the chair, I'll offer a few comments on that, and I might invite Pauline to give us a little bit of a feel of how the wider program is coming together for the council. I guess the first thing for us is to be able to understand what those new changes are themselves. So there's a package announced in 2020, and here we are in 2022, and the stuff is still rolling out, the direction's still coming. So it's really important for us to get alongside where the direction of travel is for this change. So we're plugged into a number of networks nationally so that our staff can actually get that feel, and it's quite diverse, and there's one or two court decisions that are starting to, I guess, indicate when the stuff lands, just how freshwater sits across a domain of other related activities. For instance, we're looking to embrace things like Te Mana o Te Wai, Ki Uta Ki Tai, and in the marine space, it's Te Ha Tangara Ki o Ai Tawa, which is a philosophy that makes, I guess, enhances our ability to be stewards of the natural systems that we're part of. So, and what we're finding is as the legislation comes together, it's quite clunky in order for us to meet some of those more holistic sorts of ways. And there was a recent court decision, or there's one just landed last week in the High Court, which is trying to narrow down fresh water to being sort of starting here and finishing here, which actually doesn't fit to the, I guess, the philosophies that sit outside that. So we're having to adjust to a changing legal landscape as well that's tightening us and saying, well, there's, they're disciplines, but they're not necessarily as connected as what we would like them to be. And that's a really hard message to package up for our community, because our communities see these things naturally as being connected. So we're needing to work through that sort of process. So with our organisation, we have a team that's right across the organisation that's come together to look at all of the aspects as they're landing. And there's a coordinated group put together endeavouring to plot the course that we're now on. With a little bit with what the chair's comment was before, we're heading into a future which is not actually known. And so we've got to be adaptive, we've got to be agile as we move into that. But we're endeavouring to give that, I guess, that solid platform. And then from there, we're better able to communicate out to the different communities of interest. And one of those communities of interest is the rural sector, quite definitely, who feel a lot of this change coming in through their farm gate. So that's really understood. And we do touch on some of those things today and some of the submissions that we're asking you to approve. But that's my sort of scene set, but maybe I could hand to Pauline, who will give us a little bit more of a feel for what's actually in play.
I'll just let you know about the noise on the roof, Madam Chair. They're just cleaning the gutters. Apparently they're going to be 5 minutes, literally, just so it's not going to be going on all 3 meetings.
Thank you. Kia ora. I can speak to the biodiversity and the general policy plan. The body of work that's going to come at us over the next 2 years as we go through the Tasman Environment Plan is significant. And I note we have Mirka from the EI team and Erin Hawke from the policy team on the meeting as well, and they can talk about fresh water, but we recognise the rural community has the same wall of legislational change coming at them, and there is a volume of concern with what it means for them. So to cut to the chase, Gwynnie's team and my team in the policy have recognised that we need to really put together strong communication, strong information to go out to the rural community as we progress through these changes.
Thank you. Can I add, so that, speaking with some of the farmers at home, Golden Bay, very, very stressed about a whole range of things and certainly overwhelmed. So whatever we can do on our end, so some of it's national directly, but whatever we can do our end to assist, I think is very.
And just also, I guess the real coordination across the organisation is coming through Lisa's effort. So maybe Lisa could add a little bit to that as well. She's on one? No.
I don't think so.
Or maybe Erin's.
Kia ora, thank you, Kim, and through you, Madam Chair. In the past, we've worked with the Rural Support Group, and that was in Takaka, and that worked really well. And we had a group of staff that talked about fish passage and government regulations. And we would look to do that again in the future, is to put together some presentation and work with the Rural Support Group. More formally, we've got the consultation with the Tasman Environmental Plan rolling out, and we're going to be going out to the community this year in October, November. So there'll be an opportunity then. We're going to be talking to them about freshwater management units and what catchments boundaries we're hoping will be acceptable, and talking about some visions and some values. But I also think there's opportunity for us to work on the information we share through our website. So those discussions will be had internally. And Mirka was online. I don't know. She's got her hand up, so she might be able to jump in here and be more specific about the rural community as well. So that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Mirka?
Good morning, everybody. Yes, so Jane and I are currently working on putting together a link to our website. We're going to call it Rural Hub. And we're hoping that on that Rural Hub, landowners can find all the information they need. The idea is that we are going to divide information. There's some information that will be for all of them, and some information will be catchment specific, because for the freshwater regulations, we have to divide everything into our freshwater management units. So yeah, we're hoping to get that started in the next couple of months, so that as a landowner, they can log themselves into the Rural Hub and find out information. We also have just started an email called Rural Info at Tasman, and that will go to Jane and myself, and we will then direct it from there to any other staff, depending on the question from the rural landowners. So that's going to be the start.
Thank you. That sounds like a very good idea. Thanks, Mirka. I've got Councillor Ogilvie, Tufnell, and then Councillor Mackenzie. You seem to want to go now.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a lot of good information in response to my question. I guess I still just remain, I think we just need to also keep our eye on those property owners who, you know, might have 21 hectares or something, and, you know, maybe a lifestyle type operation that's not linked into other networks. So thanks for your efforts.
And who might also not be aware of what they're required to do. Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Councillor Ogilvie.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. My question is probably to you, Kim, or to Pauline and Gwenny. The draft Indigenous Biodiversity paper from government, that requires, even though it's still a draft, it does require some sort of commitment by council to meet various standards by even December of this year, which seems extraordinarily quick and soon. I mean, there are others in terms of, say, the which go back to 2027, as far as 2027. But can we meet that date of December 22? I mean, I know most of them are sort of administrative points, but can we meet them?
Through the chair, Councillor Ogilvie, the MPSIB won't have any effect until it's gazetted. So that's the first thing that we wait for. So even though they've put a date in there, that has no meaning until such time as the MPS is gazetted. The second thing is the TRMP, to a large degree, has served us well through subdivisions, which you mentioned in our question. It has been the leverage that we've been able to apply over the past 20 years to get biodiversity protected where we wouldn't have normally, because it's leverage potential subdividers have offered up to weight their subdivision more positively. So it's a tool that we have used through the subdivision process regularly for the last 20 years, and it's been pretty effective.
Right, just to confirm that, for example, I think about 2012, 2013, there was a major plan change. I'm referring particularly to Motueka, but there are other plan changes in other parts of the district as well. So what you are indicating is that the biodiversity requirements of the draft plan, even though it's not gazetted yet, are being, as I say, imposed on subdividers and developers, going back to a zoning which was made effective in 2013, 2014. Are we able to do that? Because that's my concern, that there's land zone residential, zone rural residential, which will have wetlands, blobs of forestry, which we don't control. it's residential or rural residential, and the developer can do what he or she likes with that land. You're saying before that we actually impose some biodiversity requirements on that type of subdivision. So is that actually happening?
Can I just get you to pull your mic a little closer? Thank you.
It's not a black and white answer, I would have to say, but if it's a discretionary subdivision and they have a wetland or they have significant biodiversity on that area of land and they bring a subdivision proposal to the table, because it was subdivision rules you're asking about, they would have to be considered through that whole application process. So they wouldn't necessarily get scope to clear the wetland or drain the wetland or clear that significant biodiversity. So it's one of those things that happens in a subdivision. If we have things that the rules don't clearly protect, but we're in a negotiated space, we can leverage protection for that biodiversity. So it's not a black and white answer. And until the MPS is actually gazetted and we see the final form, how that plays out remains to be seen.
If I can, Madam Chair, following on from that, once it is gazetted, can, say, a plan change of 2012-2013 be required to comply with the gazetted Indigenous biodiversity, or not? I'm sorry, these are awkward questions. These may be awkward questions, but what does worry me is that there are zonings which go back even beyond 2012. And here we are in 2022, and even as the chair has said in her chair's report and in her comments about the way we go up to New Zealand, the future has changed, or the present has changed so much in the last 2 or 3 years. And we cannot require things on a residential or rural residential property, which we would do today if that block of land was rezoned or zoned rural, residential, or residential. Do you understand where I'm coming from? Because it just seems to me we are held back by a zoning which may have been made in 2010, 25, 2012, 2013. When if that property was zoned today, we have different requirements on that property. That's my interest and concern, I suppose.
Kim.
Yeah, so perhaps if I could just assist through the chair. The situation, if you look at it across the nation, is that our biodiversity has been declining under the existing rules. And that's the point that I think you're making. And so while we have a lot of innovative ways in this district to try and arrest that decline and incentivise people to work with us to protect and in some cases reinstate biodiversity, the national picture is that collectively we're losing the battle. So these national instruments that are coming in, both through the freshwater channel and the biodiversity channel, is all part of government's signals that there needs to be greater national control brought into this space. When that national control takes effect, it will be relevant to any decision that we make thereafter, because there's a new national set of expectations. So in interpreting any of the mechanisms that we're working with, the game will change. Now, this is something that the government has been signalling for a couple of decades in all likelihood, and it's a highly sensitive matter when governments start to dictate to what private landowners might feel was their responsibilities to look after the biodiversity on their land. And that's why it's taken some time to play out. What we have now is exposure drafts of what the government intend to do. So that's 99% over the line. And what they, in consulting on exposure drafts, it's pretty much about, have we got the detail right? And that's really, and that's where all our submissions are able to really realistically influence. And things like, can this timeline actually be fixed in that time, or do we need a bit more leeway? I think is in the detail. And so those are the things that the government will be able to take on board through the submission process. But by and large, the direction that we're having here is that government is saying take greater, regulatory direction in the protection and of biodiversity and enhancement of wetlands. That's the message that we're dialing into.
Thank you, Kim. That's very helpful. Thank you. Kim's all round. Any other comments? You've got Councillor Tufnell and Councillor Butler.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, it's an interesting situation that we're in once again, isn't it, where the government basically set the standard, and then actually applying it seems to come back then to the local authority. So somewhere along the line, I mean, and then we have the people that are actually at the tail end of being affected. So I guess we're a bit like the meat and the sandwich, aren't we, on this particular issue? I mean, I guess the only comment that I could really make about it is that obviously we've got to really work really hard on the communication thing. And I don't know how many sort of bodies the farming community have themselves that we can make use of, i.e. federated farmers or that sort of thing. But well done, team. It's I think we're fortunate insofar as that the public at large are much more concerned about our whole environmental issues and where we're heading. So at least the environment there that we're working within, we can take some comfort from it, except that perhaps a poor old farmer is going to get a bit of a hard time in the meantime. But anyway, thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I just wanted, firstly, I'd like to make a comment about the closer relationship between regulatory and policy in the environmental space. And so we're seeing that played out now. So at the next Strategy and Policy Committee meeting, the biodiversity strategy, Tasman Biodiversity Strategy, will be coming. And that will be very closely linked with the National Policy Statement for Indigenous biodiversity. So we're getting this kind of grey, mixing, I suppose, between a regulatory monitoring requirement and a policy requirement. And when it comes to the monitoring and the regulatory side of it, then that's going to take a lot of resources. And we just have not got the financial resources at the moment to actually move into that monitoring stage. So the other point I'd like to make too is that the Indigenous biodiversity policy statement will require the mapping of the significant natural areas, the SNAs, and there is some compulsion about that, some regulatory requirement about that, which is something that we are nervous about and the rural community is nervous about. And I think one of the important things about that is that this building of relationships and the communication that we've already talked about, and we've just had recently 2 incidents where our communications with federated farmers have actually misfired, in that just that the national body has been brought in for consultation, which has not actually seemed to be connected with the local federated farmers. So I think that it's going to be really important to put a lot of time and energy into building these proper relationships with the farming bodies, not just the individual landowners. That is important as well. Yeah. So those are the points I wanted to make. So sorry, not. I suppose here my question would be, when can we, if the biodiversity strategy is adopted by council, then when would we expect that the significant natural areas would be required to be mapped and required to be put onto our planning, maps and available for the community?
Thank you, Goody.
Mine through the chair. The requirement as the NPSIB states is 5 years for all of them. We're well ahead with our Native Habitats Tasman program, about 70% we think we should have met with landowner support, but we would want to go back in terms of bringing in this NPSIB. We want to go back to those landowners and bring them all along and to understand the changes, because that will make a change to how we've delivered this program up till now. It's going from a voluntary program to a potentially not voluntary program, and we don't plan on doing that secretly. How we then target the next step, which is mapping those sites that we haven't got to. I think we would do that through directly talking to those individual landowners as well. Yeah. It does give us 5 years. Yeah.
Thank you. And you'd hope to think that the relationship through the voluntary involvement in the program, it hasn't been impacted by a national direction is what we'd want, isn't it? Because it is a relationship that's going on, and isn't it, in terms of the development of those with a voluntary program that we've been involved with. So any other comment around, I think Councillor Butler also brought up, are we in the cart in terms of regulatory resources in the future? What are we going to do about that?
If I could, through you and Chair, the first point, I just wanted to get back to what Councillor Tufnell sort of advances, a standard that the government is setting. I think that's a standard, not the standard, and that this community has the ability to set that standard, which I suspect in many cases will be well beyond, where the government's trying to draw what they see as bottom lines. That an aspirational lift would be to actually take our biodiversity forward, so that when those statistics sort of come through, Tasman is outperforming where they're seeing the demise in other areas. So I guess that's the challenge. And then that comes to what resources do you deploy to do that, which is the question to me just now. And that is a case, well, if we view the community as part of that resource and we're working with that community, then we've actually got an army and we don't necessarily need to have all of those resources in-house, because there's a collective view to take the district forward. And so the ultimate question about have we got sufficient resources will come at points in time. Right now, we're using the resources that we have spread across the organisation in as a connected up and manner as we can possibly think of, but we know we can always do better, but we're working on that. So it's not really a case right now of signalling that we need more resource to do this job. It's how good are we at harnessing the broader resources that can be offered up by the community, and some of those suggestions about tapping in better to some of the industry bodies is very much a part of that. And indeed, Ministry for Primary Industries are very aware that there's some pressure going on the rural sector, and they tend to look at that quite closely, and they're interested in meeting up with us to actually talk through what some of those issues are and how they can be of assistance. Because while you've got MFE, Ministry for the Environment, typically setting the rules, you've got Ministry of Prime Industry trying to keep that sector productive and well balanced. So we find ourselves in the situation where we're in all of those conversations. So we're very well positioned to influence the way this thing takes shape. So I don't really want to sort of make a commitment as to whether we've got enough resource or too much resource or too little resource right now. The challenge for us is to use the resources we have got as wisely as we can. And if we do need more resource, that's the conversation we need to come back and identifying to council where we think we are short and what value there would be in adding to that resource base.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? And we do need a mover and a seconder for Kim's report. Somebody's happy to move, Councillor Mackenzie, and second, Councillor Dowler. Anything further? So the resolution. We're receiving the report and then we're retrospectively approving 2 submissions. So I'll put the resolution. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, Kim. Stock control. Thank you, Kim and Gwenny. Stock control bylaw process. Bit of a groundhog moment, maybe. Groundhog Day moment. Thank you.
Morena koutou. Through the chair, the purpose of the report today is to discuss bringing forward the timeline for finalising the draft stock control bylaw. Initially, it was planned to not be finalised until the new year, but the report proposes bringing the process forward to be finalised at the 22 September regulatory committee meeting. So the key reason for doing this is that it would allow us to close this process out sooner and thereby address the concerns that the farming community have with elements of the bylaw more quickly. And we've heard already this morning how under the pump the farming community is. And we do recognize that elements of the bylaw caused some concerns among them. We've been working really hard during the consultation process to really understand what the issues are and address them through this process. And we're confident that due to the consultation process that we've had, that we do have a good grasp on what the concerns are and how we can potentially address them. So we've had a public webinar and also 2 individual meetings with representatives from Federated Farmers and the Golden Bay Community Board. And also yesterday I went out to a farm south of Murchison and spent the day participating in a major stock drove, which was a very new experience for me, but I learned a lot and was a really important part of the process, I think, in terms of enabling me to really better understand what their concerns are and what's reasonable or not reasonable for farmers. So in order to bring this process forward, we'd need to appoint a hearings and deliberations panel. So that's part of the report, so that the hearings and deliberations could be held in late August and early September before the 22 September regulatory committee meeting. Full council. And I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you. Councillor Bryan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Claire, for the report. So, Claire, just a question, then I'll come to comment. So the feedback you've engaged with both consultation and in person yesterday, has that led you to think that you have to make many amendments or just a few that have been brought to your attention initially?
Through the chair, I wouldn't say many. It's sort of more in terms of some of the phrasing of the bylaw and just restructuring a little bit. But after talking and having this really robust conversation with them, it's not a huge amount of issues that are causing a problem. It's a limited range of requirements in the bylaw that are being perceived as not practicable for the farming community. But I don't think that there would be a huge number of amendments to it.
No, that's what I thought would be the case. So I'm happy to move the resolution, Madam Chair, with yourself as a panel member, myself and Councillor Mayling. What do you want to go on, Tim?
I'm sure you'll be right. I'm sure we'll have some ability.
And Florence.
So that you're suggesting 3 panel members.
Yeah, I noticed there's 4
gaps. 4 spaces there. So I'm assuming, is that a ward? One from each ward? What are we thinking?
Sorry, I think those were just a random number. 3 is absolutely fine. Usually we try to have an uneven number, so 3 is actually good.
Okay.
Happy to second Councillor Bryan or Deputy Mayor Bryan's proposal.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Walker.
Yeah, thank you, through you, Madam Chair. So when you came to us, you obviously had a proposed timeline and you'd worked through how you got to that timeline. And I'm not too sure I understand that when you bring something forward, that's actually not putting the community under more of the pump, because surely if you're going to bring something forward, that's going to make them deliver on something much sooner, which surely must put that farming community under more stress than if we stuck to the time frame that you went out to consultation with. I'm a little bit confused how you think that's going to make it easier on a community that's already grossly affected by the changes that legislation are pushing their way continuously.
Through the chair, just to answer the first part of the question first, that what we had in mind was just to avoid the convention as much as possible of having decisions at the last full council meeting of the Tronium. And that was simply it. It isn't a strict legal requirement. It was just for convention. I guess the rationale for bringing it forward is we've got a lot of uncertainty out there around the requirements hanging out around in the farmers' minds, and actually addressing this process, addressing the concerns and closing it off means they know where they stand and they know that some of the things they're most concerned about in the proposed bylaw are addressed and resolved, and we move on. And if we leave it for longer, it's not the end of the world. It's a difference of a matter of months in terms of implementation, but it means it's hanging around in their minds, causing them anxiety and concern, rather than having a process about being heard and seeing a process for resolving those. That's the rationale.
Councillor Mayling.
Right, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I'm supportive of this. The sooner I think it's addressed, the better. I have some experience with stock, and I used to get in trouble because my stock got out, but I no longer have any. So I think I can look at it from both sides, which I think is important. And we need to be responsive to our community, and the farmers have indicated, from what I've heard, that they want this resolved. So the sooner the better. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mayling. I had some contact from some of the, farming leaders, or women actually, in response to this. So I've got a bit of lowdown on their, I guess their position or experience from the receiving end. But I think what I understood was I think from Feds particularly, perhaps, just felt like a closing back to them. So they offered some advice, and I think there might have just been maybe, I'm not sure, but a get back in terms of going back to them. I know that their policy team are willing to include it. So to my thinking is it was something's unintended's happened here, and yeah, I'd like to add, I found it pretty disappointing that some members of council. You got some, pretty awful messaging about this, and which I just find completely unnecessary. If something's, people aren't happy about something, we can say we're unhappy about it. But some of the vitriol, I think, was pretty awful. So that was a shame. And I know that the women that spoke with me, were pretty upset about that too. So I'm supportive of it just getting cleaned up more quickly. And those that I'm aware of in the farming community would appreciate that. I think that the community board in Golden Bay has got a submission they're preparing, and at our community board meeting, I think I did suggest that perhaps they could meet with some farmers there to, help develop the submission. So it sounds, I've seen the notes of that meeting, so that seemed like a really good process. So we want a bylaw that's obviously workable and certainly if permits involved, not onerous at all. So I'm supportive of that. I'm happy to chair the hearing panel, and Councillor Bryant's given me a nod that he's okay with that, and that might have been a thumbs up emoji from Councillor Mayling up there on the screen. Just essentially looked like a big blur, but I'm going to interpret that as a thumbs up. So we'd have Councillor Bryant, Councillor Mayling, and myself as chair. Any other comments? Nothing from the Mayor? No, probably heartily sick of it, possibly. Okay, this has been moved by Councillor Bryant, seconded by Councillor McKenzie. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against? Are carried. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for your work on this. I imagine there's been some level of stress, and I think it's great to crack on with it. Yeah, thank you.
Can I just say that the engagement we've had with Fed Farmers has actually been really good, and all of the respective parties have been involved in that. So I genuinely want to say thank you to them, because it's actually been, they welcomed Claire out to a drove yesterday, for example, and didn't treat her like a martyr or a pariah. We've had some really excellent suggestions and very genuinely useful feedback. So I just want to shout out to them.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. We've got here in a lunch adjournment at 12:20, so a little ahead of schedule. Neil's here. Let's bring forward the water monitoring report. Is that all good? Thank you. Thank you, Neil.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll take the report as read, and there are just a couple of points I would bring forward. It's quite apparent that missing water readings are sort of at the forefront of the report, and that trend continues for those of you who would have seen reports previous. It's not for lack of communication. We do communicate that water meter readings are important. Council do want them back in. The resource scientists do want those readings because they are important when it comes to decision making about the resource. I would also point out that this season, the overtakes of water, when drilled down, are significantly less. But what I think those points show is that the weather for the season very much dictates how people use the resource and how they feel about the resource. For instance, we did have a wetter season, and I think that is reflected in the missing readings and the way that people respond by not submitting their readings because they feel that, why do we need to? So it is something that I feel will reoccur, and it is something that we will have to follow up and deal with in subsequent seasons.
Thank you. It is interesting, isn't it, about why the meters aren't reading the information centre, and I think, yeah, I don't know how, what, I know you've been trying to work that out, but there's something, yeah.
It certainly is, I feel, well communicated pre-season letters during the season. It is important that we get that information through. We do want to know the state of our aquifers. We want to know what's being used, because ultimately it is for the benefit of everybody, all the water users. When we have the best information, enables us to make the best decisions.
Thank you, Neil. Councillor McKenzie, and then Councillor Butler and Councillor Bryant.
Thank you very much, through you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for your report. And I certainly don't want you to take my comments as any kind of criticism of your work, because personally I think the council staff do a fantastic job. So, but, this is probably, well, it will be the third time that I've read this annual report on the water monitoring, and I've probably raised the same points every time for the last 3 years. So I'm not going to go into the details, but I guess my question would be that our compliance monitoring program has got 3 primary objectives, and they're laid out in your report under paragraph 4.3. So what I would be interested is having a quite objective assessment done as to how well our system actually meets the objectives for what it's been set up to do. Maybe, you know, a traffic light system, something like that. And in actual fact, I think there probably should be a 4th objective. And I think the 4th objective should be about having a good, maybe value for money system. So, you know, the questions that go through my mind when I read this report is, we talk about, you know, the impacts on our IT system and our databases. So then my mind goes, gosh, are we fully cost recovering everything that it takes to monitor the system back on to the users of water? Because obviously we have a lot of other ratepayers across the district who aren't supplied with water and have to provide their own. So are all the costs actually sheeted home? So I think there should be some 4th bullet point around the cost of the system and whether it delivers value for money. So what I see when I read this report is I see non-compliance, I see rework, and then all of that makes me think of inefficiency. So I just think maybe some dashboard reporting to demonstrate how well the system is meeting the objectives for what it's been designed to do would be a useful addition to the annual report. Thank you.
Thank you for your thoughtful and considered comments. And yeah, I think you raised really good points, Councillor. Councillor Butler.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to ask a question about the water meters. Water meters.
Through you, Madam Chair, telemetry.
Yeah, well, so my question is that it appears that they're not always accurate, because when you've done audits, you've found that some information has been missed out. There doesn't seem to be much increase in people using them. They have to use them if they're unaffiliated for the Waimea Dam, but people are more comfortable using the template.
Through you, Madam Chair. So it is not all unaffiliated users that will have to have telemetered meter readings. It is only those who have a use of 2,000, greater than 2,000 cubic meters per week. So it's not all, and it's quite a limited number that would be specifically required through their resource consents. So it's, but the question or the matter you raise with regards to telemetry readings, on the whole, I would say, in my experience, they have been accurate, but like most things involving technology, there will be blips. When we get those blips, what it means is that we just have to look at them individually, and we can do that. We have a telemetry officer who can dig deeper into the data and find out what went wrong, if it did, and provides us with correction figures. So whilst nothing is 100% in the technological world, on the whole, it has been accurate.
Thank you. Councillor Bryant and then Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So now I've just got a few questions for you this morning. Starting with in relation to the preferred method of data returns, and 63% still prefer or supply readings electronically via the web page. I think you've heard me talk before about mobile phone use, because that's what I use. Because I think the thing with the web page is people have got to turn their computer on, log in. Well, you've got your mobile phone quite often at the meter with you. You can log it in and just push submit, which is a much easier process in my view. Do you think that we should be encouraging or helping people use that mobile phone app more? Because we're still only at 12% using that.
Through you, Madam Chair. I personally think that we need to offer a range of ways for people to report back to us, because we do have a wide range in the district of people with technological capabilities, and I mean that from a geographical point of view as well as from a knowledge point of view. Again, I have found that people have reported back to us that they have sometimes struggled with mobile phone returns, as good as it sounds, because it depends where they are located at the time that they send that message. And sometimes at the bore or at the meter, which is ideal, sometimes it doesn't get through. So that is something that I believe is improving throughout the district as we get more coverage. So again, we have to give people choice as much as we encourage it to return how they see fit. Paper returns, as slow as they are still popular with a number of our water users, because they prefer to write something down rather than, as you say, turn on a computer or make a mobile phone return. It makes life quicker for us, because it means that we gather that data quicker. We don't have to wait a week or possibly the next week for postal returns to get to us.
Much more relevant. So thank you for that. Yeah, and as you say, we are getting more coverage, particularly with small internet providers providing coverage. So you would think that we should be able to increase that percentage over time. Then just moving to water meter audits, you've said that you've sent out a letter mid-July. That process has taken quite a while, I understand, or is it a moving target each year?
Sorry, can I just clarify?
The water meter auditing of the water meter itself.
Oh, the auditing program. So we do have a summer auditing program where we get the summer student in.
Right. This is verification, maybe a better word, of
verification of the water meters.
Yeah.
So you'll appreciate there is a rolling program of re-verification, and verification was first introduced by the size of the water take, and gradually each year we will have followed up with these water users, and then there'll be a rolling re-verification process. Obviously, due to the regulations, every 5 years, if you're subject to re-verification, that has now gone through its first cycle, and we're chasing people up for re-verification of those meters. Of course, part of that process, we get new consents, so we get new water users coming online as well. And we do have a few users that have never verified their meters. And so they are being followed up as well. So it's a continual rolling process.
So do we complete the year that obviously 1 year becomes during 1 year users of that volume? So do we try and complete them all within 12 months so we're not having two lots in the following year?
Yes. So we have better reporting processes, and we're able to draw the information to see where people stand. And Brenda Clapp, who is our telemetry officer, also looks after our verification process. So we are able to pull up reports at a certain time of year. Normally, it's once the season has finished, when we've got time to follow up we'll look, and as we have this year, we sent out different communications to people who have a different status, i.e. those who have never verified, those who are overdue for re-verification. And we also, as a means of trying to front foot, we also look ahead to those who may be due within the next 12 months, just as a heads up to say, make you aware that the process or the re-verification will need to be done by this date. You may want to front foot that because a lot of the local accredited service providers have got big waiting lists.
Right.
So we do try and front foot those that are due.
For you, Madam Chair, just a follow-up question around that. So when you send a letter, do you send that to the verification provider or the consent holder or both?
So when you say the verification provider, you mean the service provider?
The service provider, yeah.
No, the letter goes to the consent holder because they have a choice of which local service provider to engage. We do also provide the information who are the locally accredited service providers, and locally accredited service provider means Irrigation New Zealand blue tick accreditation. So they're registered as being proficient at a certain level. And so we give people the choice. And what we require is for them to acknowledge and confirm to us that they have engaged one of those service providers, and we accept that they aren't necessarily going to be able to carry out this process tomorrow. All we require is confirmation that this will be done, and we will check that. We do record and make notes on individual records as to their current status.
Thank you. And just one further question. I was talking to a consent holder this morning that hadn't used his consent last year, but all consent holders get a end of season letter, do they? I wasn't aware of that until today. Even if you haven't irrigated also.
Yes, yeah, it's a service that's provided to all water users.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Neil. Councillor Turley and then Councillor Walker.
I'll pass. Neil has answered my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you through, Madam Chair. Following up on what Councillor Bryant said, I wonder if how much education we still do in informing our community on the importance of why we need these statistics, why we need the data. Because I wonder how much of our community think it's all about what's going to cost them as opposed to, the wider benefit of us knowing what those aquifers are actually like and how they're performing. So I wonder how much, that's my first question, education we still do around educating, and which is the best way. Is it using your cell phone if there's coverage, as opposed to filling in a manual piece of paper? That's my first question. My second point, if I may, through Madam Chair, is if you look at page 70 on Diligent, and you're looking at 8.1.1, and it talks about your budgeted expenditure, against your actual, and we get given this figure. And then 8.2, it tells me that the program was 37% water user funded this year. I find it really helpful. So I'm sorry, I didn't have time to go back on a year ago's reporting. To me, that's great information, but I can't compare it and I can't make it relative to understand, is that 37% a win? Is this a good news story? Or is that actually a sad thing that we need as council to continue to work on and look at? So if someone could give me that information of, so the 8.2, the program was 30% water user funded this year compared to, I would find that context quite helpful moving forward when I was speaking to my community. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair. Firstly, if I might just address your point about 8.2, I can find that out for you. I would just compare it against last year, and then perhaps any other information that you would like around that, I can find that out for you. Okay. So your previous point about education and information, We do have the pre-season letters. We have the end of season letters in which we do point out that this information and requirement to report is really important. There are, I have to say, the majority of our water users do understand the value of that resource. They know it's important. The majority of water users do the right thing. I need to say that. As for further education, other than constant reminders, I am open to further suggestions, maybe even from the users themselves, as to the individual types of returns. I think it's quite varied. I think the options are really quite varied. There's no one now who does it by fax. We did manage to tease the last couple of fax users. So yes, so we have managed to, and as soon as that went, we did remove it from the list as an option. But again, I am very aware of the different wants and needs of those water users and how they want to return. So those options are always explained and made available, and we still have people who are very much entrenched. And you'll see that it does change incrementally each year.
Thank you for your questions and points. There'll be an action item will come out of your questions around 8.2. Thank you. We haven't got a mover or a seconder yet for the report. Councillor Mackenzie is happy to move. Councillor Walker? Yeah. And I'd just like to go to Kim for a comment, particularly in relation to what Councillor Mackenzie's raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I was to draw on the conversation that I've heard from councillors today, and after having discussed or just met with Neil earlier this week to discuss this report, because Neil's been out of the country for a while. So it's been an opportunity for me to come alongside this and compare that with, I guess, some of the other systems that I've been associated with in recent times. I've been out of the council system for about 6 years, and prior to that I was at Environment Canterbury, who are the administrators of the biggest water use in the country. In fact, 60% of all the water extracted from our natural environment is extracted in that region. So they've got very, very sophisticated systems set up to deal with this. And I've been talking to Neil about leveraging back and seeing whether or not some of that system knowledge that they've built is in fact transportable to us. Because what I sense is that after the 3 years of the report looking more or less like it has, we are describing a lot of activity, but we're actually not drawing the picture of the system that we've actually developed. And I take the point that Councillor Mackenzie has put on the table here. And that probably is our next challenge, that we've now got an insight as to what systems work, and we've got some insights as to what reporting systems work best. But we've also got in that time frame other experiences, and I can also draw on what the fishing industry have done. So they've moved from paper reporting to every single vessel reports electronically every day, no matter where they are in the country, whether they have cell phone coverage or not. So they've developed systems to address a lot of the things that we might see as insurmountable, because the way we know things are done, it wouldn't accommodate it. So there's an ability here to pick, I guess, progress on related fronts and perhaps just revisit how we're doing it. And at a future regulatory committee, I sense that we can come back and say, this is our analysis, this is our assessment, and this is the preferred model, given the greater importance I think the region is going to be placing on being able to accurately capture water use. And with the dam obviously taking shape, it's going to be really important that we are able to differentiate between affiliated users and non-affiliated users, and the integrity of that system is basically able to be demonstrated back to our community. And so the system that we have in place to do that, I think, is really going to come under greater scrutiny. So I just think we've got to a point where we can now probably look a bit deeper at this, and I just thank the councillors for their constructive comments which has sort of taken us to that place.
Great, yeah, very good. Thank you for raising the issues that you did specifically, great to be so responsive. So that's very good. We've got a mover for the report, which is Councillor McKenzie, and Councillor Walker seconded. I'm going to put the resolution. Oh, you do. I've forgotten all about those things. What are they called? Rights of reply.
Right of reply.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much through you, Madam Chair. Well, thank you, Kim. I really appreciate that. I think that's precisely what I've been asking for 3 years, which is actually for someone to be able to get up on the balcony and actually take a whole system approach and thinking to what's going on here. So really excited about what that might deliver in the future. So thank you.
Thank you. Apologies for not offering rights of reply earlier. See me in the councillors' lounge, perhaps. So the resolution is receiving the report. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against? Carried. Thank you. Thank you very much, Neil. We're now going to adjourn for lunch, and we're due back after lunch at 1:15 for the Farm Dairy Effluent report with Kat. See you then. Did they hear that? No. Welcome to those on Zoom as well. And Councillor Mayling's rejoining with us. And I see that media, oh, yes, Max is there. Cherie's not with us perhaps yet. Right, let's get underway. Welcome, Kat. We've got the Farm Dairy Effluent Compliance report. Over to you.
Good afternoon. I take it that the report's been taken as read. There are a couple of points I will just expand on or talk to that I feel are important. First of all, just the changing face of dairying in Tasman. It certainly has changed in the last 15, 20 years of an industry that was made up primarily of just small farms, a lot of small family farms. And over time, we have lost actually a total of 34 farms, or 34 suppliers, I should say. For the first 10 years or so, it was not so much them going out of business or so much, it was amalgamating smaller farms into bigger farms so that your dairy population and the extent of dairying remain the same. But the last 5 years, we're actually losing our farms. And that's been shown with a decrease in the actual dairy cow population. We're down 15,000 cows from where we were, say, 15 years ago, 10 years ago. A lot of these farms, they're either going out of business for economic reasons, or they're changing their land use to become support blocks, or some of them become lifestyle blocks. They've been going into sheep and beef instead, or just beef or mixed. So there is a changing face there. And another land use that's coming be quite dominant is the hops, and that's particularly so in the central region. So that's Upper Motueka, and now down in Murchison. We've lost our biggest farm down in Murchison now, and it's gone to hops and yeah, some
from milk to dairy. Isn't it from milk to beer, isn't it?
Yeah. So yeah, there's certainly changes, and those changes are to be continuing in the future with more farms, particularly the smaller ones, signalling they'll be moving out in the next couple of years. That comes a lot from economic pressures and also just uncertainties of the future. On the face of it, the payout looks good, but when you get beyond that farm gate, things are really tough. They're hurting just like everyone else is presently. Which brings me to my second point is, even though all these pressures are on farmers at the moment, there is still the continued uptake of good practice of upgrading their systems, installing site-specific effluent systems. And by that I mean storage systems that are sealed and sized to their circumstances or to what they need. And this doesn't come cheaply either. A basic system, 100,000. If they want to go further and actually overhaul their whole system, 300, 350,000. Yeah. So it's a continual uptake of this good practice. And we now have nearly half our farms with site-specific systems that are built to industry standards, which is just great. And we have another third who are on the journey of getting there. And by that I mean they have started, they're either done the groundwork of doing the calculations so they can start doing the costings to the point right through to nearly commissioning. So it's a journey they need to work through purely for economics. But we do have another third of our farms getting there. So we have about 3/4 of our farms who either have a system in place that meets industry standards or they're on their way getting there. So that's great to report on. I think the compliance statistics kind of speak for themselves. We run quite high here in Tasman, around the 90% or above, and we have for a long, long time. We can always expect there to be some things happen, but what was different this year is all our non-compliance was around ponding. And this was quite a surprise, particularly when I just mentioned we have really good systems out there now and more coming on board. They have a lot of storage now, or a lot of farmers do, but we're still getting ponding. And I thought long and hard, why did this occur? Because after all these seasons, we haven't had a lot of it happening. And I think it was just, a lot of it is down to the lack of skilled staff that's around in this past year. Tight labour market, with COVID restrictions bringing in migrant workers with their skills. And also the training opportunities haven't been there either. The primary ITO certificate in effluent management hasn't been available. That is up and running now. So hopefully going forward into this new season, those skills will be back with our farmers. The degree of non-compliance, a lot of it's minor, just minor ponding, so just like a puddle or intermittent puddles of effluent remaining on the ground an hour after application. There were 2 that were moderate, but again, it was, it wasn't, like I say, significant, and it was gone for a good couple of hours. That had to be put down as moderate just for the extent. So that's basically what was found this year. Again, farmers are doing really good stuff out there, and there's always room for improvement. So quite happy to take questions.
Thank you. I wonder with farm ownership changing and people going to sheep and beef or leaving altogether, or I just wonder too around the generation, if there's a generation around that sort of home in Golden Bay. I think some of the people who are sort of in their 60s, even early 60s or so, are thinking, I don't know, they get pretty tired. Life of farming's hard work, and I've been thinking about that, about how many of those farms, we're losing farms in the Bay and have done, and going to grazing blocks or selling or something. And I think quite a few of those people are in their early 60s or mid-60s. Is that something you're noticing? And
Absolutely.
I think that comes to that point, and just with all the changes with regulation, the freshwater changes.
Particularly in Golden Bay, a lot of our farms are generational farms, 6th, 5th generation. there isn't the succession there. The children coming up are either not interested or not willing to take on the burden of their parents, what they've seen their parents going through. And as you have just mentioned, the fast-paced regulatory change at the moment. So yeah, they're turning more into support blocks or selling out to the neighbours. So
yeah,
it's definitely a pattern out there.
Yeah,
I see it over in Golden Bay particularly. Yeah.
Yes, and I know with the good payout, you know, we had great payout. I mean, great payout and terrible season. So you know, ended up about equal. You know, so that was certainly our neighbours to us. You know, we've spoken about that over the fence about. You know, just a poor season, you know, difficult season, and ending up about the same as if it had been a lower payout
and it's not just the poor season. Its on-farm costs have skyrocketed as well, and I don't think people appreciate that.
Yeah.
Even you know, fertilizer doubled its price.
Doubled.
Yeah, nearly doubled. It's and just animals like where everyone's affected by fuel costs. So are farmers. So yeah. They may have a good payout, but when you don't have the grass growth or, you know, a milk production, plus the costs on, but using like everyone else.
Yeah, or if you're in that cycle of the process of getting your containment, you know, paid for, big costs.
And feed costs too have skyrocketed, and that's where we see a lot of our farmers now moving to closed systems. So they'll be making their feed on site instead of buying it in.
Yeah. Just seen a few trucks starting to head over the hill with baler, John. Councillor Walker.
Yeah, thank you, through Madam Chair. Happy to pass or move it. I'd like to acknowledge the mahi that you've done, Kate, and the wonderful relationship you obviously have with our farmers. So a big thank you, and thank you for your easy to read report. I guess I just have, and I don't necessarily think that you'll give me the answer, but somebody might be able to. I guess one of my concerns is because there is so much pressure on our dairy farmers and we're losing them, as your statistics have pointed out, I'm just wondering what environmental effect we're getting by our dairy farmers being replaced with hops, because I know that's not going to cause an effluent problem. But I know that the soil changes a lot when you're putting hops in, and the nutrient level and other things, nitrates and things, spring to mind. And I just wonder if someone from environment could explain, if they do know, what the difference would be if we lost all our dairy farmers and hops took over. And my second question, if I may, through you, Chair, is farmers are doing what they can, and we call it best practice or good practice. I just wonder for the couple that aren't able to or aren't doing it for whatever reason, what incentives are there from the industry to help them get across the line? I know that it's not us that can fund that, but I just wonder what will it take to get that last three, if I read it right, across. Do you know what I mean? Like, and where does the incentive, what initiative needs to come to allow that to happen without them then selling out to hops, for example?
Okay, so for your first question, I'm not able to answer directly, but I think, like with anything, any land use change, any change, there's going to be a snowball effect down the road. But as to what that is, I can't answer that. It'll have to come from someone else. But you're correct, there will be an effect, but what that is, I don't know. As for that last 3%, there's always going to be, doesn't matter where you go, a small percentage of people who will not do something unless they're made to or have to. As our rules stand at the moment, they don't say you have to do this. It says what you must achieve, and that is no ponding, no runoff. So by what I've been working with all these years is just one-on-one with farmers, showing them how they can achieve or different ways to achieve that. And the challenge is to get them to understand they need to be doing that 365 days of the year. So although our rules don't say you must do this, it gives them what they have to achieve, it's working with industry. So Dairy NZ, the supply companies, so that's Westland Milk and Fonterra, who are here in Tasman. Again, one-on-one. And first of all, it's showing them and getting them to understand what they need. So getting their system sized, and that can actually be done free. like through different mechanisms within the industry. So it's getting them even to do that is actually hard. But what I'm trying to get them to understand, and I've been educating them, is that once they know the volume that they need, they can then do costings. They can then start talking with their peers and looking at systems that they like or suits their business style or their philosophies of farming. And they can start doing costings like that, and then they can start doing their budgeting. But as to making people do it, unfortunately, it usually comes down to when things go bad. Things don't go right, and it's done through the courts, unfortunately. But on the whole, our farmers are moving forward. Yeah.
Thank you. And I see you've got Merkel with the hand up. And is it your signal?
No, sorry, I'm joking. So Merkel would be the first person to answer.
Yeah.
Councillor Walker's question on the hot.
Oh, lovely. Merkel, you've got a comment? Thank you.
Yes, I just thought I could answer or could attempt to answer the questions for land use change from dairy to hops. There is a perception out there that hops use a lot of nitrogen fertilizer, and they probably do in terms of the application rate. But even if the fertilizer that they use is higher than the nitrogen fertilizer that's used by dairy farms, you don't have the dairy cows peeing on the paddocks, which is in the dairy farm system. That's where that's where the main nitrate leaching issue is coming from. Is actually the cows urinating, not so much the fertilizer itself. But we are currently working together with the hop industry. So there's 23 hop farmers that have banded together into a group, and they've just applied for what's called the Accelerated Freshwater Farm Plan Fund. And I've had a copy of their application, and we're helping that they get the funding, and then we'll work together with them on setting up nutrient management modules on what is good management practice for nutrient management on hops farms. So watch that space.
Thank you. Someone had told me the other day about ways that cows have been trained to pee while they walk to try and avoid the pooling one place of urine. I thought you might like to know that, a bit like the well, also, taking away fences, and using devices on them to say, well, you're there now, don't go any further. Some quite, actually, it's coming back to me now. Others would know more than that. A friend of mine was staying with some people, and this young chap was involved in the development of these quite innovative and working ways with stock. Didn't mean to say that. Councillor Bryant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah. Thank you, Kate, for your full and comprehensive report as usual. I've sat here quite a few times, as you know now, and listened to it. But what I do notice over time is that the level of compliance is getting better and better. Yes, sadly, the number of dairy farmers is going down, but we're getting very few non-compliance. And generally, I think you would agree that the level of compliance and on-farm standards have lifted over that period. Just have a couple of questions in relation, and one other comment, just in relation to the herd you talked about at the top of the Tūtaki and going to hops. I've actually been up there and seen the hop poles, and man, it's pretty impressive. I'm actually taking the mayor up there in a fortnight. I hope you never told me. I've told you that, Robin. So yeah, it's a really impressive sight, but sad to see all that good pasture go into poles, but that's the sign of the times. So I have a few questions, Kat, just in relation to firstly in compliance generally. So your report, I take it's to the end of June 30th year, 2022, is that correct?
It goes from the 1st of June to the end of May. So it's really the dairy season of Tasman, which is...
Yeah, what I'm just asking is because we've had a lot of weather since you've done this report, and has that, and it may not be directly what you're covering, but just asking generally about, and maybe a question for Jane or Merker in relation to pugging and the rules around that we now have. And I think we might have even done a flyover.
Yeah, okay. Jane, my colleague, Jane Stewart, she'll be able to comment on that directly. She's now responsible for doing the MPS monitoring.
Jane's there.
Yeah, Jane's there. So I think the flyover, winter grazing flyover for Golden Bay, Mohu has happened. Jane, would you like to comment on that? Thank you. You've muted yourself.
Can you hear me?
I can, yes, thank you.
Excellent. So we undertook a flyover 14th of July around the Golden Bay region, and that was after some significant rainfall as well. Overall, we were quite impressed with the management practices we saw. There's probably maybe 4 farms that we need to follow up on, but as a whole, some excellent examples of buffered waterways and the critical source areas. Certainly a lot less than last year. Obviously, we took a flyover last year as well. So at this stage, it's looking pretty promising, and we're doing a flyover of the southern region, hopefully next week.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been even wetter since you did that last flyover. So if I just return to Kat, and just a question, and I'm not sure, once again, if you'll be able to cover this or it's someone else's, but been reading in the farming media where our dairy farmers now have to report their nitrogen usage. Is that something you covered, or who covers that here for us?
Again, that's Jane who'll be covering that.
Okay, so perhaps Jane, would you be able to comment on how that process is working?
Right, so that's just the dairy farmers that need to report their nitrogen use, and there's 3 tools being implemented. Online tools, one through Ravensdown, one through My Balance, and there's a regional sector tool being developed. The due date, as per the regs, is the 31st of July, this weekend. However, just recently they've pushed that date out, and they're now asking farmers to have that data in via one of these 3 tools by the 31st of October.
Well, that's quite a long push out. And then, Kat, just the further question, just in what the chair said in opening around the number of herds, particularly in Golden Bay, reducing, I guess a lot of those would be herds of 200 to 300 cow size that have sort of on the cusp of being full-time economic or not.
Yeah, certainly as smaller farms, I would say definitely in the, like around 150. Our average herd size is about 260 in the whole of Tasman, but the ones that are going are around that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Say 170 to 200, the smaller ones.
So
absolutely.
Yeah. And that'd be right across the district, but predominantly in Golden Bay. And then just in closing, thank you once again for all the wonderful work you do working with our dairy farmers. And I do really hear good feedback, so really appreciate it. Thank you.
You might be happy to second the
report. I'm happy to move.
Yeah, it's been moved by Councillor Walker, but if you have the second, that's great. Thank you. We have Councillor Tufnell next, and then Councillor Butler.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Look, the questions that I had have been well answered, and thank you for that, Kat.
Councillor Butler.
Thank you. Thank you for all the information, and certainly we're seeing social change in the dairy farming situation. I, was told, dairy farmer told me recently that his children want to take over the farm, but they don't want to milk cows. So they'll do something else with it, and that must be happening,
Yes, that's common.
In more than one situation. Yeah. Yes. So my question really was in relation to the new rules under the policy statement of fresh water and the environment standards and the farm management plans that people are going to have to do. Are they doing them already? Is it going to affect your work? Are you going to be having to work in with more with, advisors who help them put these farm management plans together? I know a lot of work's been done, with Fonterra, like Nuka has done that in the past, but it's sort of coming towards us, isn't it?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know. Again, okay. Jane's one who's running the freshwater project now. I used to do like pretty much everything, and now that's become
So you're anticipating that you will keep on doing what you're doing?
Yes.
Right.
Yes,
That's really was my question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do spend a lot of my time with the farmers, supporting them and guiding them through these new regulations that are coming in, because there's a lot of anxiety out there, as you must appreciate, of all these changes. So a lot of my time is not just, doing the actual inspection, it's leading and guiding them through this, showing them the pathways of where they need to be going. And the farm plans is another piece that they don't have to come to grips with. Yeah. But the actual inspection of the farm dairy systems will be there.
Will be continued. Yeah. That's my question. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And a further comment from Kim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to pick up on your question about the farm environment plans, it's another example of something that's had quite a long run up, and it's I guess that concept is mainly taken shape in a sort of a non-coercive environment, and certainly Canterbury was a major leader with its 11 or 1,200 dairy farms of a much larger scale, and looking to get basically a sector leadership to actually establish what they're doing and how they're going about it, building in industry good practice standards from the different sectors to actually assist the art of regulation that is sort of the harder line regulation being achieved. And that's well and truly in play now across that biggest of our regions. The central agency, Ministry for the Environment, sort of quite like what they see, but they realise the rest of the country hasn't got that same depth and long run up into this. So they're in the frame and in the mindset that regulations requiring these things are required. Now, they haven't got to the point that they've set what these regulations are yet. They're in the pipeline. They're coming through. They're sort of indicating that it will happen rather than it may happen. And in my report, I referred to the fact that Tania Harris has been basically, what we would say, lent to MFE for 12 months to help with their thinking around the operatisation of this. In other words, landing it so that it can be adopted in the regions that haven't got this big depth that likes of Canterbury has, in a region like Tasman, so that when it lands, it's actually able to be nuanced into the approach that we're taking. There will always be an independent audit, required running across that, and CAT's part of that side of the system. But we are very much internally engaged into how this could be nuanced. And with Tania being sort of the lent to MFE, we're hopeful that the implementation of this is actually thought through, and when we get to that point, that it won't be such another train or risk of a train smash where another thing comes in the farm gate that hadn't been anticipated. So, we're right on the cusp of being able to take that forward. But my personal view is it's a massive tool for the sector to come at us with, more so than the regulator to design for them.
And I think we're pretty lucky here because we've had quite a lot of work already being done, as you say. And thanks to Merkel and Jane for that.
I think it is really helpful. It's great to think, isn't it, that we've got the caliber of staff here at council that can be contributing. It's not that funny, Robert, I didn't think. That MFE are, wanting our people over there to assist in the development of these processes and regs and whatever comes out of it. And I think that's really heartening when I hear that. I know there's something for us to fill here when they go. And just to add, actually, in that vein, that local government review panel, I know a couple of them a little bit now, and having a cup of tea with them up there in Palmerston North, and they are just incredibly grateful to have Janine there working with them, and she's making a really significant contribution up there. So I think that's it's something for us to feel good about. Thank you. We've got a mover and a seconder for the resolution, which is receiving the report. Now, just to add too, actually, I didn't get to the meeting, but in Golden Bay the other night there was a hui on hemp farming. There's a number of farmers at that, and someone that had been there said it was pretty well received and pretty interesting. So the business about what the next generation are going to farm and how they're going to do it will be interesting, won't it? I'm going to put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. And against, carried. I really value what you do, Kat, and more importantly, how you do it, and the guidance and support that you offer to farmers it's treasured here. I think it's something that we really, really value. So thank you very much for a really good report, and of course we're very happy with the compliance rate. Thank you. Thank you. Going to move into confidential session. Councillor Bryant's moving that we do, and Councillor Ogilvie is seconding that. There's nothing I need to read out publicly to do that. I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Just tidying up those on Zoom.